He's still the spare, and it's killing him. It's crushing him that, he's still just considered that, that word spare stamped across his forehead.
This recent weird pretend royal tour of Nigeria by the gruesome twosome Harry and Meghan. It's brought a lot of criticism, a lot of debate. Should they be doing this sort of thing? You and I discussed the kind of country Nigeria is. Female genital mutilation is rife. Hundreds, thousands of kids get kidnapped and forced into sex slavery, and also women's rights are non-existent, etc., etc. You wouldn't have known that from feminist Meghan while they were there. You'd have thought she'd touched down in paradise. Anyway, it turns out that when Harry was there, he met this sort of local king. I'll try and get his name right. It was Oba Abul Rashid Adewale Ankambi. He was a local king, and Harry went, "Oh, look, I met one of my in-laws," the royal kind of network sort of thing. Anyway, the guy, it turns out the guy is a two-bit con man who's been deported twice from America, is about as much of a king as I am, and he was jailed after trying to cash a stolen cheque for £247,000 in the States. Now, on a real royal tour, this kind of thing would have been investigated. No one would have met, King Charles or the Queen or any of our senior frontline royals, Prince William, on a royal tour that hadn't been properly vetted. Now there's a big picture of Harry meeting this guy. This is the danger of a couple of naive people saying, "Oh, we're going to do our own royal tours," and just turning up and visiting a few places. This is the danger of it, isn't it?
Yeah, the danger of two people chasing fame and chasing a buck. That's exactly right. And what's interesting about this meeting is I died a little bit inside when Harry walked into this room full of strangers and said, referred to them as his in-laws and said, "I'll skip the protocol because at this point we're all family," because I'm sitting here thinking, well, your actual in-laws are literally ill within driving distance to you. Poor Thomas Markle, what he must think when he flips on the television and sees Harry enter a room full of strangers and say hello to my in-laws. It's just so cringeworthy and just so pandering. It's just like so, it's insincere. But you're right. It's not just this Nigerian king who, like you said, was first arrested in Boston in 1998 after he tried to cash a stolen check for over £247,000 from an aviation company, the very famous aviation company called Boeing. I don't know how he thought he was going to get away with that.
I heard of them.
Yeah, but he was also charged for forging a check for £59,000 using the name Thomas Eyring.
Yeah.
He's been banned from the United States for life. This is twice. He's been told you cannot enter the United States, and occasionally he shows up with whatever wife he's in tow, that whatever wife he's with at that time, because he's run through wives too.
Yeah.
And says, "We just want to go shopping in New York." But Kevin, there was also a man from Nigeria that welcomed Harry and Meghan, and he is a fugitive wanted in the United States for over $20 million worth of money laundering. So not great optics for this couple. These are two individuals that are very, let's just say it, shady, that should not have access to these people that at this point in time have some type of political influence.
The king had said, "You're coming over, for the Invictus Games service at St Paul's Cathedral. Why don't you stay at St James's Palace, a very nice palace just up the road, up the street from Buckingham Palace." Harry turned around. He's got this obsession about armed police security. And he's suing the Home Office here to try to get that because he doesn't warrant it anymore because he's not a frontline royal, and he's furious about that. So Charles apparently said to him, "Why don't you stay at St James's Palace while you're here? Maybe we could get together or something." And Harry said, "Oh, no, I can't stay there because it's not safe enough. It's too accessible to the public, and without police protection, I cannot possibly put myself at risk there." So he promptly checks into a far less safe, far more public hotel and didn't see his dad. Now, How hurtful must that have been to the king? You know, I don't want your palace, I'm going to a hotel. King then says, well, frankly, I've got 2 engagements that day. Seems like I can't fit you in. But what a thing to do to your dad like that.
What a thing to do to your dad. But additionally, you know, to just twist the knife, he releases a statement that says his father's too busy to see him. When we know that it's allegedly St. James's Palace. If it is that palace, that's directly adjacent to Clarence House. That's where the king stays when in London. And it is a relatively private space, which would be guarded around the clock while the king was in the vicinity. So for him to complain about a visible location with a public entrance and exit points, and you know, for Harry to complain about those things are so silly. If the king was there, it would have been fiercely protected. And so Harry then goes as far as to complain internationally that his father's too busy to see him, a man that is cancer stricken. It's like, I have a hard time lately determining whether these people are stupid or cruel, because when you release a statement like that, you are villainizing your father. You are putting your father in a very tough position. Now we've got everyone in the world saying how nasty of King Charles to refuse to see his son. And so are you not thinking about the consequences with that statement, or are you just so cruel that you're trying to put your father in a difficult position?
Did he spare a thought for them when he sort of turned around and said, I'm not staying at St. James's Palace because it's not safe? He just seems to think of himself, doesn't he?
Well, I mean, again, we come up with the word consequences again. What did he think the consequences of that statement about the king were going to be? It was that it was going to villainize his father. Either he was completely oblivious to that fact, or that was his intention, which again is ruthless. So I think that they don't consider consequences very often. And you're right, this is not the time to have. I think that Harry and Meghan are safe in the UK. I firmly.
I'll tell you what, Kinsey, they're a lot safer in England and Britain than they were in Nigeria, a very, very dangerous country.
Right. Yeah. And I think that they are safe there. And this really obsession that I think he also inherited from his mother, Princess Diana. I think at the end of the day, he has to realize, guns didn't kill his mother. It was a seatbelt. She didn't have her seatbelt on, and there was somebody that was inebriated behind the wheel of a car. No one pursued his mom. Her death was horrific, but her death was an accident. And we see him obsessed with this narrative about their safety. I think that these are 2 individuals that no one wants to hurt. No one wants these people hurt.
I think it's partly to do with his mum, but I also think it's to a great extent, it's to do with his status. This puts him below. He's got dwindling status in this country. He's not a frontline royal, and this ruling that he can't have armed police protection puts him below the rest of the family. And I think he hates that. He's got nothing else in his life except to worry about his status, and that's what this is all about. It's pathetic and it's pompous, if you ask me.
He's still the spare, and it's killing him. It's crushing him that, he's still just considered that, that word spare stamped across his forehead. When he shows up, the red carpet's not rolled out for him the way he expected it to be. They are still trying to play half in, half out royals. That's what you saw with the Nigeria tour, a title an arrangement that Queen Elizabeth said was an absolute no-go from the start. She's gone now. So they're basically running over the royal family and trying to force those optics anyway.
Harry's making a point here, and it's a point related to the fact that he feels so aggrieved about not getting his security.
But it did mean, if it had been St. James's Palace, for example, right next door to Clarence House, the King's residence, that would have meant that without being spotted, he could then have gone in and had a cup of tea with his dad.
This is the problem. He could have easily done, but Harry is feeling, he is absolutely convinced of his rightness, that he needs proper security when he comes to this country. He doesn't feel he gets it. Yet he can go to Nigeria, where someone is obviously footing the bill to great extent for his security there. And you think, which is potentially more dangerous? Of course he's high profile, but even if he was walking from out of that hotel, there would be a degree of protection. They're not going to just allow him to flounder. So
he's got his own security team that travelled with him as well, hasn't he?
So sometimes I know it's more personal. It's basically his mission is to sort this out.
But how do you think the King would feel about this, Val? Because actually that statement was put out, which effectively said, well, it's the King's fault. Yes. He didn't find time. And a lot of people said, well, that's not on. Your son's travelled.
I think the King would have been quite hurt by that. It was quite passive-aggressive, the Sussex statement, wasn't it? Nice on the surface, but really...
Hopes to see him next time. Yeah. Yes. Staying with Prince Harry, because he has lost a bid to name Rupert Murdoch in legal action against News Group newspapers. High Court Judge Mr Justice Fancourt said that allegations against trophy targets like Mr Murdoch added nothing material to the case. This was an attempt by Prince Harry to broaden out this case against News Group newspapers, Rupert, by bringing in dates back to 94, right up to 2016. And of course, the headline-grabbing one, he wanted to include allegations about Rupert Murdoch, and he's been told no.
Well, and this is the problem for Harry. His mission again is to take on the press, and this is all part of that time where he felt that he was being unduly targeted. This is, again, he won't let this one go, and he will try everything. But unfortunately, the courts of law do seem to be dampening his wish to see everybody summarily being hung, drawn and quartered for working in the press. I mean, that's really what you feel he's going with this. Sometimes he just less is more. He maybe just needs to back off, but he's not for telling, I don't think. And that's part of the problem. He wants to feel that he can get some big names found guilty of doing whatever they're supposed to have done.
Now, Tatler, of course, is the British Society Bible. All the good and the great love a bit of Tatler. And if you make the front cover, it's kind of up there. That's a big thing. It's an honour to be on the front cover. And I know over the years, artists and designers like to get a little bit quirky. They like to kind of tease a little bit. You see different images of famous people. We saw the portrait of the King the other day. It was a bit unconventional. I thought it was amazing, by the way, the portrait of the King. But to some people, it was unconventional. To others, apparently, it was demonic. Goodness me. But Tatler decided they wanted to pay tribute to the Princess of Wales for its latest cover, to honour her strength and dignity. Well, what they did, they got this British Zambian artist called Hannah Uzor to paint a picture. Okay, so if you're watching, all right, on TV right now, or one of our digital feeds, YouTube, whatever, you can. I appreciate you can't see this if you're listening. If you're many of the millions listening on radio, I'll explain. Let's have a little look at what the artist came up with to show the strength and dignity of Kate. Here it is. Have a look at this. And there, no, the real one. No, the actual. Oh, that is it. It's worse than I remembered when I saw it 5 minutes ago. Sorry, is the artist an adult? Can I just... No, it's a kid, right? Hannah Uzor, the artist, is a child. It has to be a child. That is... let me try and get the age right on this. I reckon if you were quite good at drawing as an 8-year-old and somebody said, draw the Princess of Wales, that is what you would draw. That's what you'd come up with. This is, I mean, remember, Kate's not been very well. I think it's the last kind of stuff she needs to see. So this is to pay tribute to her strength and dignity. And what we have been given is quite literally a child version, cartoon version, done in what appears to be crayons of the princess. I mean, it kind of sort of looks like her, but not loads.
Portrait on the front page of the Tatler right now of Kate, Princess of Wales. Let's have a look. Can we get closer? Because it's the face that's terrible. Any chance of getting face closer? Well, listen, you've seen it. We'll get a close-up of that and come back to you. But, I mean, from where I'm looking, it's all right. But the face looks like some sort of kid has drawn it.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because you talked about the Red King and now we've got the Blue Princess. And you're right, it does make the Jonathan Yeo portrait seem, the like rather of King Charles is great when you compare it to this one. But what makes a great portrait? What is a good portrait? Obviously, the artist does have freedom of creative expression of their ideas and of their emotions, but presumably a portrait is meant to capture something of the person. Now, the artist, you're quite right, portrait painter. She studies at the Slade, which is London's most highly respected art school, where all the great artists have trained.
The Prince and Princess of Wales, destined for the roles of King and Queen of the United Kingdom. The royal couple's journey has been far from plain sailing. They've faced plenty of adversity along the way. So, are they ready to rule? This is the story of William and Catherine, monarchs in waiting. Prince William, born to reign over us, but Catherine Elizabeth Middleton came from far more humble beginnings. Her father, Michael Middleton, was a flight dispatcher, and her mother, Carol, was a flight attendant at British Airways. Catherine went to Marlborough College, one of the most prestigious schools in the country, before going on to study art history at St Andrews, where she met her prince.
They were mates, so there was certainly no thunderbolt, there's no love at first sight. And they hung out together, and at the end of the first year they agreed to be part of 4 friends who were going to live together in a house or a flat the next year. And even when they moved into that house or flat, they still weren't a couple. It just I think in William's word, it just slowly blossomed. But of course, one of the key moments when it slowly blossomed was at the end of the first year, when there was a fashion show, which they did every year. It was called Just Walk, and it was for charity. And Kate wore this extraordinary outfit, basically a kind of bra and pants and a diaphanous dress over it, left not much to the imagination. And William supposedly said to a mate of his, Fergus, wow, Kate's hot. So I think that first sowed the idea that she's more than just a friend.
There was quite a lot of distance between the media. Paparazzi pictures were pretty much frowned upon, and information was scant. But what did start to emerge really on a couple of occasions, firstly, there was a lot of talk about him having a girlfriend, even though he was denying it, saying he hasn't got anyone special when he was interviewed for his 21st birthday. But there was a lot of talk that he'd had a girlfriend, which now turns out to that it was Carly Massey Birch, but that was just a small relationship. And then the Catherine link came a little bit later. It's when he was seen with her on the ski slopes amongst a group a little bit later. And also it did emerge in one of the papers around about this time, quite a little bit further into the university relationship, about this fashion show, but that was a little bit later on. So initially there was talk of a girlfriend, there was talk of this girl being on the scene when he was about 21, but he was very keen to try and keep that under wraps.
It has been reported that after Catherine learned William would be attending St Andrews, she herself changed her choice from Edinburgh to St Andrews.
I think it's fanciful to say that that was the case. But when she did meet William at university, although they may have bumped into each other in the parties and things in the past, she was quite embarrassed about that. So I think all of these things add to the fact that it was this simply isn't true. She picked the university because she wanted to go there to study history of art.
It's a good story in the same way that there was a good story that she'd had his picture on her wall when she was a teenager at Marlborough, which was simply not true.
After about a year of dating, William and Kate's relationship became public knowledge when The Sun published photos of the two enjoying a ski trip in the Swiss Alps.
Yeah, one thing I remember about that, unless the photograph, which was taken, and I think they were having a kiss on the slopes. It was the fact that the Clarence house was absolutely furious. That was Prince Charles's headquarters. They were absolutely furious about the invasion of privacy. And Arthur Edwards, the Sun's photographer, he was banned from Harry and William engagements for quite some time afterwards. He was later let back in again, because Arthur always is.
In Kenya, with a view of Mount Kenya in the background, in a lodge on the Lewa Reserve, Prince William proposed to Catherine. He'd been carrying the ring, Diana's sapphire ring, around in his rucksack while they were on safari for 3 weeks beforehand. He hadn't dared to let it out of his sight, and finally it was the right moment and he proposed. And even though they'd talked about it for a long time, Catherine said that it was hugely romantic, and it did come as a surprise to her. And then later on that month, 16th of November, we got a phone call and we were all invited to St James's Palace for one of the most surreal press conferences I've ever been to. We stood and drank tea out of bone china cups while milling around with this newly engaged couple, giving them our congratulations. And this was Kate's first official appearance, really, in front of the media. She described herself to me as being like a swan, looking very serene and calm on the surface, but legs frantically paddling underneath the water. And from then on, she has been one of the most photographed women in the world.
Well, it did intensify the media attention, but I think once the engagement was announced, the media was really put on a warning, really, from the palace, to back off a bit. The mainstream media, that is, not the paparazzi. She was part of the system then, and the firm gathered around her. Before that, there'd been warnings from lawyers that they'd paid for from the parents, etc. But this now, she was part of the firm, and so I think they sort of protected her from that moment on.
So I think genuinely, the nation rejoiced when William finally popped the question, because Catherine had to wait a long time. There was lots of rumours, there was lots of cruel, sayings about her, weighty Katie, talking about the fact that she had to wait so long. So I think everyone was relieved, like finally William has popped the question, but it also meant that we had a big bonanza. And we haven't seen a wedding like that since Charles and Diana.
The highly anticipated royal wedding was watched by a staggering 72 million people across the globe. As well as fans, close friends and family gathered in London in their droves to support the then Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Among them was Catherine's bridesmaid and sister Pippa Middleton, who caused a stir in her gorgeous bridal white gown, and Prince Harry, who appeared to be William's best man, but later admitted in his book Spare that he was a public decoy for William's private friends James Mead and Thomas von Straubenzee.
It was such an extraordinary event. The church, filled with these trees, all the great and the good, all the celebrities, Elton John turned up, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out on the street. I think people were glad that this golden couple, this wonder couple, were going to get married, but it also meant that we could have a good knees up. But the day was incredibly significant, not just for the numbers, but for the way that it kind of united people. And it made a lot of people fall in love with the royal family again, because we hadn't seen such a huge event for decades. We hadn't seen such a wonderful union, particularly the fact that he was to be king one day.
For me, the most iconic moment of that day was when Kate stepped out of the Rolls-Royce Phantom 6 with her father, Michael Middleton, about to walk into Westminster Abbey as Kate Middleton, a middle-class girl from Bucklebury, and then emerge with her prince on her arm as a future queen.